All right, Toby, I'm pumped to dig in here with you and explore, first of all, your book, The Hybrid Dad Blueprint. That really caught my attention. I can't wait to hear you tell me about how you came up with the title and what this means to you and what you hope it means to others. But I do know that in that book, you emphasize the importance of aligning passions, principles, and purpose, which I fully agree with and love that and have used that model. Can you walk us through that particular mental model or framework or whatever we want to call that? And specifically how that's helped you or how that helps fathers, by aligning these core elements in their lives. So
Yeah.
tell us a little bit about the story, tell us how it came to be, and tell us about the impact that it's making. And then we'll be done with the show and you can just talk for the next 50 minutes.
That sounds good. Yeah, thank you so much for having me. So the book is a culmination of about 3 years of writing online. So I took a kind of online writing course back in the middle of the pandemic, and great people that I interacted with at the time. I started a newsletter, I started a blog, and I was just kind of writing stuff more kind of experimental and stuff that I was an experience from my life with lots of kids, and just kind of just writing out. And I was not sure necessarily where it was going to go, but I had the sense, like there are so many mentors that we are so fortunate to be able to connect with now online. A lot of times these mentors don't even know we exist, and that's totally fine. But we get a lot of knowledge from them. And although I wouldn't put myself on any sort of pedestal with those guys, I thought maybe there's something here that might just resonate with another guy that might start a family or has a few kids, and just see where it's going. So the dad angle wasn't always like a major thing, but obviously over time, I was sharing my story online and writing blog posts, and it was very clear, like, okay, the dad angle, because we've got 6 kids now, is a strong one, right? So we've got, our kids are range between 2 and 14. So we've got little ones and we've got teenagers now. So anyway, so I was writing these posts, and they were kind of, sometimes they were helpful guides, sometimes they were reflections, stories. But when you write a blog or write a weekly newsletter, you write the stuff and then it kind of goes into the dustbin, because nobody is going to go through a personal blog and read that stuff. And I thought, you know what, there's some stuff in here that I find actually helpful for myself just to reflect on, and what are the things I've learned, lessons I've learned when I was up on a Scottish mountainside, and my dad, my son, and myself, we had a falling out. And how did I handle that? I made mistakes, and I wrote about it, and people resonated with that. So real stuff that happened. And actually, I thought these lessons need to be somehow captured. So I went through my blog and I pulled out all these different articles and compiled them into a book that had a certain flow to it. And part of that is for people to understand that, I think especially as dads, we start out, we go to high school, we go to college, we have a job. And I think in those early stages, your vision of yourself might be quite strong. It might be tied to a job or not. But over time, it gets diluted, right? There's so many things that are pulling you in all these different directions, and you end up serving so many different masters. But often you lose sight of who you want to be. Now, if you're a family man, your family is going to be the top priority, and I'm not disputing that. But at the same time, I think you're serving your family better if you know where you're still wanting to go. You're still growing. Just because you're dad doesn't mean you need to stop growing. Also, you don't have it all figured out. That's totally fine. So keep building that vision. And that is, I think, where the principles and the passions and the purpose all come in. So what are the things that, your principles, what are the things that you are kind of steadfast with? You can think of a Captain America sort of character. There's certain boundaries that he will not cross, and say, like, this is what I believe in. And I think that's important for us to also have those, to be clear. What are the passions? What are things that light my life and my soul on fire? Because oftentimes, 9 to 5, there, loads of things you need to do, bills you need to pay, dance recitals you need to go to, toddler birthday parties. These can all be quite draining, but there's certain things that set you on fire and your soul on fire. And what are they, and how often can you reintroduce them into your daily life to be a fun, loving, and kind father and husband? And all of that, I think, then once you've identified those, flow into your purpose. I think for us, and for the audience here, a lot of times it will be being a family man. That is our core purpose. That's who we want to be. But defining that, and what type of family man, I think it's really important for us to actually write down and reflect on and refine over time. And the book
Mm.
is aimed to help people find that.
When did you put this out?
Just at Easter time this year.
Oh, congrats, man.
Yeah, thanks.
You mentioned a falling out that led to a story. What can you
Yeah.
tell us about that moment and what you learned from it?
Yeah, I mean, interestingly enough, when we were talking earlier, it was all about how the difference between being at home and being at work, right? There's an element where I've talked to so many dads, and a lot of times it's the emotional control that is a really difficulty between switching off from work and going back home. And I think at work we're very good at putting on a mask. We're really good at saying, we are in control of our emotions and we have to keep a certain level of professionalism, and we wouldn't shout at a coworker, we wouldn't lose our temper, and all of that. And then you come home and you just kind of, if kids didn't clean up, or they messed up, or your wife is tearing her hair out because your kids have been misbehaving, it's very quick to lose it, right? And that happens to everybody. And then you might end up yelling at your kids, and then you regret it at the end of the day because you don't want to yell at your kids. You want them to see you as a fun dad, and you want to have a good relationship with them. And it can be a bit of a vicious cycle, right? So that can be a thing. And so the story really was, we were going up on this mountainside, and our eldest, he was definitely pushing both of our buttons big time, and he was pushing the buttons of his siblings too. But him and I ended up having some sort of shouting match at the top of this hill, just saying, he was saying, oh, we're both kind of accusing each other of making it worse the whole time, and both kind of storming off in different directions. And actually to realize, like, hang on, like, you're the dad in this situation. Like, as much as he might have annoyed you, but like, this isn't leading a family. This is you being on the same par and actually shouting at your son and him shouting back at you. It's silly. And it's really just, it's just breaking the bond that you guys have built up for so many years. This has to stop. It can't be like that. You can't be going on holiday and have this sort of interaction with your son. And actually then going back and really mending the bond. But we still both remember that story for better or worse. And for me, it's really like, I hope it really was a turning point that I said, like, this is not going to happen again. We're not going to go on holiday and have us butt heads, because we need to be unit. And I need to teach him. I need to help him grow, not butt heads with him when we're away together.
So what's different with you now that, the irritation will still be present, and yet maybe, and I'm assuming, I'm making an assumption that you are different now as a result of that commitment and discovery. So what changes? Like, what is your internal dialogue? What are your actions? How do you avoid the shouting?
Yeah. It sounds simple, and it really isn't, but it's just try and stay calm and take an extra breath whenever something goes wrong. To
So is it just awareness? Like you have a higher
yeah,
degree of awareness and can make a better choice?
yeah, I think just being really clear that, I think it's also an element of time running away with your kids. As I was saying, my oldest is 14, and I was really, for the last few years, reflecting on where I was at that time, because we had him when I was 23. So the age gap isn't huge enough that I don't really remember how I felt as a teenager. And to say, like, if my dad was reacting, and he did react to me in a certain way, and he was shouting at me at certain times, and I remember those, and actually they, over time you still hang on to those things. And I just didn't want those moments to overshadow the fun parts that we could have, and exciting adventures we could have together. So really it's slowing down and actually just thinking, it's not such a big deal. Like, if a friend of mine did it, I wouldn't be angry at it. Like, okay, the kids spilled something, it's fine, we can sort it out. If they're continuously hitting a sibling, that's a different matter. But again, it doesn't need to be shouting. You can just take them to the side and actually explain it to them, removing them from the situation, and humor, just laughing it off. It's a major thing.
Do you know Terry Real, the author and relationship coach?
No, I don't.
He has a great phrase. Nothing said. There's nothing said with harshness that can't be said better with loving firmness.
Oh,
And
that's beautiful.
that is a mantra that I attempt to live by and have done a better job continually in my life, but I've still lost it and still spoken in a way that's not great. I probably did it 2 days ago. If I'm really looking at like a camera catching me, I'm like, yeah, that was pretty charged, when I was talking to my kids about a new dog that we got that had surgery, and I was very concerned with the dog. But my concern and fear for the dog led me to like channel all that fear to my kids, and they
Yeah.
felt it.
Yeah.
Even my 15-year-old's like, I don't think it's that big of a deal. And I'm like, you're probably right. But my fear is kicking in right now.
Yeah.
Let's talk, Tobi, about these three things that we brought up earlier, these passions, principles, and purpose. And I want to ask you for some stories in your life. So if you can, take me into a story of each of these, whether that's about you, the man, the family, or the business. All three are welcome in the conversation. But talk to me a little bit about passion for you. You can approach this from the angle of like, what are you passionate about right now? We can talk about finding your passion and the road into that. We can talk about how you cultivate passions within your kids, all relevant, important subjects. But I'd love to hear a story about this, and perhaps how you've honed this skill, leaned into this. Take that wherever you want.
Yeah. So passion, I think my big passion really is an adventure, right? An adventure doesn't necessarily mean having to go to the jungle and trekking through the jungle for 40 days by myself, but even micro
But you have
adventures.
done that?
No, I have not done that. I have not
Okay.
done that. So
But
I'm
you've
also
done some pretty cool adventure experiences, right? Some pretty epic endurance events.
yeah, and
I
I
see a
think
lot of
that's
medals behind you right now in the video.
oh yeah, that's true. That's true. Yeah, that's what I found. I mean, interestingly enough, so in terms of the question, in terms of what my passion is, it's I've always felt adventure was something that I was seeking, but I was shying away when I was a teenager. I was very much shying away from putting myself into difficult situation. So not necessarily hard work, but something that I felt I was uncomfortable in. I would just shy away from. So that could have been academic as well as much as it was physical. So I wouldn't really push myself to that limit. And as I was saying to you, originally from Germany, came over to Scotland for a gap year. I was very much challenged in that environment where I went from a household of living with my mum and dad to a household of 11 people living together, looking after people with disabilities. I mean, that was just like, dropped in the deep end, really, very much. But I found actually in that I was thriving in challenging environments, and I actually enjoyed it. And that adventure of actually finding my true self and pushing those boundaries actually revealed something that I was very proud of. Actually, somebody who can withstand certain pressure, who is resilient, and I still have that fire in me to keep checking and finding out where is that. One of the areas I think, if I had an alternative version of myself, would have probably thrived in the military to a certain degree, but I didn't go down that road, and I still had that adventure seekingness in me. So I was trying to figure out where I can find it. So it would have been a lot of adventures in the Scottish Highlands and trekking with, a backpack of 80 pounds in my first solo camping adventure, which was stupidly heavy and yeah, just big mistakes made there. But those adventures are still very much vivid in my head. And, becoming a dad, it became a bit more difficult to do these adventures, but adventure races, so very long Spartan races, so, 32-mile Spartan races or ultra racing, that's something that I really very much enjoy, because you're seeking out a different version of yourself that you find when you do ultra running, because there's so much pain. It's such a long distance. It's so long that it's easy to give up. But at one point you reach that point where the pain is just there. And you're just saying, do you know what? At this point, I'm going to finish it. It's another 3 hours. It's fine. And that's a passion of mine, actually finding that limit and then pushing past it.
Mm. What does it feel like to you, Tobi, to be passionate? Like, dude, if you ripped open your chest and we could see your heart crawl into your head, hear your thoughts, experience all the sensations of what real passion is for you, like, what is that, man? Like, how do you articulate and describe that, you're like, I'm passionate about this?
Yeah, it's just an endless thirst to explore that more, whatever that is. Just
Mm.
wanting more of it and not stopping and finding out more, and just yeah, it's an interesting loop I find with passion, where you want more of it and it feeds you at the same time. So it's this
Yeah.
continuous, everlasting energy.
How do you view passion as a dad with your kids? And I'll give a little context for that question, which is I experience, and I've seen other people experience the question: is my son or daughter passionate enough? I'm not seeing the passion. not seeing them be really excited about learning and taking on challenges. Like they don't want to do anything, they might say, like a parent might say. And so I also know, I mean, you've got 6 kids, but parents with multiple children will often tell me, hey, they're all different. You know, they're all different. And you might have one that's just all about sports, and you go, I don't even know what I did to create that. Like they're just all about sports. And then another one's like, could care less about sports. And another one's all about getting good grades, and another one isn't. You're like, they grew up with the same mom and dad, perhaps, you know, the same household, the same, certainly not the same friends or experiences or life experience. But talk to me about your view on seeing passion in your kids and how you might amplify that or nurture that or give credit to that. And also, how do you handle it if you, and I'm making a strong assumption here that you don't see passion all the time. And when you don't see it, how do you confront them, or do you confront them?
Yeah, that's a fantastic question. So I think what we've done for a good number of years, we gave all our kids as many opportunities to find their passion, but they were all doing the same things, right? So in a for varying degrees of intensity and length of time, but they were doing piano. They're also doing judo. The girls were all doing dancing, a variety of dances, ballet, jazz, whatever. My son did some basketball when he was younger, then dropped it and found it again. They were doing swimming. They were doing gymnastics. So we just gave them a huge range of opportunities to just experience stuff, to just see, okay, what sticks, what are they passionate about? Are there certain elements where we want to lean into? And for me, I find it always quite important to not let them quit when they first say they want to quit something, and say, you know what? Okay, you've said you don't want this. Let's just do it one more term. And if you still hate it, we're going to talk about it again. So that is, I think, really important, because my parents let me quit stuff quite early on, and I don't think that served me very well. I think it's important to push past and actually see, because sometimes you find, as I did, passion in hard work, passion in adversity, right? So you need to figure that out. But now they are older, so especially with the 10, 12, and 14-year-old, they're very clear of what they want. So as I said, my son, he started basketball. I put him through basketball because I played basketball when I was younger. And then he said, oh, I didn't want to do it anymore. The pandemic hit, so he didn't do it. And then he found this massive passion for basketball now. He plays every single day. Like, he just loves it so much. But with that,
Did you watch the Olympics?
yes, of course we did.
Yeah,
Of
yeah.
course, yeah. But even with that, there's an element where his personality is one that is probably a bit more lazy. Same way that I was as a teenager, right? I was definitely more on the lazy side. But then it's about, okay, hang on. So you're saying you're passionate about this, you want to take this further. Well, this is what it takes, right? And then, really talk it through, and then, watch videos and talks by Kobe and MJ and all that stuff to actually say, okay, if you're really that passionate about it, there's something here that you need to put in, and that's hard work. It's not just about being passionate. You need to then work hard, and really marrying that up. And that's for all of them. Again, as you were saying, some kids are different than others. The 12-year-old, she's the hardest worker I've ever met. Like, she will, like, even if talent wasn't there, it doesn't matter. She will work so hard that she will outcompete everybody, but not out of a willingness to be the best, but to be better than herself was yesterday. So that's, they are very different for sure.
John Wooden would be proud.
Yeah, that's right.
That's cool, man. Appreciate that thought. Let's talk about principles. Yeah.
Yeah.
And let's talk about what that means to you, how you might define it a little bit. I know we already covered that for a brief moment, but specifically, maybe we can understand your heart around this again through, one of your favorite stories. So you can take this wherever you want. Anything that comes to mind or to your heart around the principal piece of this, stories that you want to tell, even about your clients or other people. I'm open to all of that. But maybe if I go back and I prompt you, if you have something here, again, we didn't prepare this. We're shooting from the hip, but it's, thinking about early principles in your life. And perhaps this is a way for me to even ask you about your relationship with your father, which I don't know if it's amazing or terrible or non-existent. I don't know. But, thinking back in your early development, like, where did you learn principles from? Who showed you the path? Who were principle centered men, particularly in your life, that might have, had an impact on you? I love knowing that because it gives me oftentimes a vision of how I might be for other people to be a principle centered person when I hear how your mentors and father figures changed your life in that way.
Yeah.
So, yeah, again, feel free to ignore that question and answer it any way you want. But what comes to mind when it comes to principles?
What comes to mind when I think about early childhood is that I grew up in a Catholic household. I would not describe myself as a Catholic at all. These like today, would call myself probably much more spiritual rather than necessarily religious. But I grew up in that, and that's obviously a very heavily principled life. And that my parents wouldn't be hardcore on it, but we would go to church regularly. I was an altar boy for a number of years, so the principled life that I would see would be probably very much within that kind of church realm, and the people that we knew that were living that life, which would be priests or whatever. That I was admiring their willingness not to have a family, because that's what you have as a Catholic priest, right? So
You
you
remember
give
that
them.
as a young child or boy or young
Yeah,
man,
yeah.
admiring the dedication of that?
Admiring the dedication, but questioning if that's a good way of living or not. That was
Makes
always
sense.
like, because I just, you know,
We know where
especially
you
when
ended
they,
up.
yeah, well, that's right. But especially when you're thinking about, like you're preaching about love and family, but you don't have a family yourself. That was always, I never understood how you could, because
Yeah.
why that's such a shame. I always thought, that they couldn't have that. But equally, I was inspired by that, because I thought, that's a very strong way of living, actually sticking to the principles
Yes.
like that. So that would be kind of, I think, early childhood. And my dad, I think, certainly had, he's a retired now PE and math teacher, but he very much was into bodybuilding, not into any competing stages, but he would work out regularly, and he would take me when I was from a very young age. We would go to the gym, and we would do that. And we'd go swimming every Friday night. So very principled, very disciplined in these matters, and that very much stuck with me. So the idea of Arnold Schwarzenegger, Sylvester Stallone, the good old movies, watching them and being inspired by these action heroes, and then, but not just watching the movies, but then my dad telling me, and this is how they developed that muscle, and this is what they were doing here. But and then being principled and consistent enough to actually go out and work out and do the necessary exercises. So he definitely instilled a very disciplined mindset in me that I was shying away from long time, but definitely have refound in my adult life. That for me, 5 a.m., between 5 and 6:30 a.m., that's my sacred 90 minutes every day that I spend both mentally and physically, kind of sharpening my sword, my mental and physical sword.
Um, do you have principles written down, displayed, ones that you review regularly? Like, is it etched in stone somewhere for you?
Yes, and I reviewed regularly, and I also rewrite it regularly. So it's nothing that it's not a mantra that I've been has been a guiding light that has stuck with me. But every 3 months, I'll sit down and I'll write out again what are the things that are most important to me, and then I kind of distill it down to the
Do
to
you
the
have
things.
that? Do you have that handy?
If you give me a minute, I can give you.
Yeah, man. Let's get
Hang
into the
on,
real stuff.
the real stuff. Um, Hang on.
And of course, read some or part of it or whatever you choose to read. I don't know how long it is or what's on there, but I'd love to actually hear the real words that you use.
So the essence, the short version of it, the essence, my vision is to evolve into a better version of myself, embodying strength, inspiration, and leadership for others while maintaining a strong focus on family and personal growth. So that's the current version of it.
Beautiful. Thank you for sharing that, man.
That's all right. And I've also, in the way I construct it, I also look at my strengths and weaknesses, and then I look at how are my strengths helping me, and how are my weaknesses hindering me from becoming that version. And
Yeah,
then
that's right.
another way I do it as well is I like to use a vision board where I actually put different images just of different people up, and write a sentence under that of why I find them inspiring, right?
Mm.
And then kind of just
Like, who would be on there for you and why?
So number one is definitely Jocko Willink. He'll be number one. And if I could only have one, it would be him, right? I think that's quite clear for me. His disciplined way of life, but I think he's often misunderstood because he's his picture is black and white and very sinister and very disciplined and up at 4:30. But having followed him for many years and actually having spoken to him a couple of times on Zoom calls, he's a very fun and kind person. And I think that mix of actually being somebody who's very disciplined and can be very hard nosed and a good business person and financially savvy, but equally a good dad and a fun person to be around. I think that's a great combination. So so Jocko would definitely be up there. Another person I find inspiring is Cameron Haynes. I don't know
Yep.
if you've come across Cameron Haynes.
Absolutely.
But equally, I think it's interesting sometimes with these people, there are certain elements that I admire and certain elements I think are too much. So as dedicated as Cam Haynes is, I think he sometimes, and he's admitted that in his book as well, maybe overstepped the mark in terms of, family came second to his pursuits, something I wouldn't want to do. But I'm not judging him for it. It's just that's,
That
where
was
I'm.
his reality or his story. Sure.
Exactly.
Yeah. Or
Exactly. And I
even our
think,
perception. Yeah, it makes
yeah,
sense.
exactly. And I think it's important to just nuance, the certain elements that we might find.
Great humans. Yeah, just
Yeah,
because you love and respect someone for something doesn't mean everything they do is also something you love.
exactly.
I
We're
think
all
there's
full of faults.
Yeah, that's right, man. Jocko is an incredible human from my perspective. I had the opportunity to introduce him once at a entrepreneur organization event that
Oh, awesome.
I was emceeing and got some backstage time with him. He sent a message to my son Tiger at the time that I still have and look back on with great fondness because he took a moment to say some kind words to Tiger, which was great. And my youngest Ocean, who's 9, is a massive Jocko fan. Like, I mean, he must have listened to The Way of the Warrior Kid on Audible like 4 times.
Yeah, yeah,
It's awesome. So,
yeah.
and maybe even more. We used to one time he was going through a season where he was waking up in the middle of the night having these nightmares, these night terrors, if you will. And
Mm,
he'd wake up, he'd come to my room, and he couldn't sleep. And I said, "Hey, why don't we go sit and on the couch and we'll listen to Jocko." And I remember holding him at like 1:30 in the morning when, he's probably 6, 7 years old, maybe at the time, and us listening to the audiobook and him finding so much comfort in Jocko's voice and the story of strength and discipline. It was very cool. And even to this day, like literally this morning, Ocean's like, let me see how many pull-ups I can get. And I know that came from Jocko, dude. Like, how
that is
many
so
pull-ups can
awesome.
I get?
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's so awesome. Yeah, yeah. No, we've got all of the Warrior Kid books. I've read them all to the kids. My eldest has the CD still in his room.
Oh,
Um,
wow. That's cool.
so yeah, yeah,
He
no,
did so great with that, man. And I'm so happy for him. Like, I'm so happy that he found the success that he did because of the man he chooses to be and how he puts himself out there. Like, thank goodness for him, man. I'm so happy that he wrote those books and
yeah, he's
did such a
impacted
great
so many
job.
lives. Yeah, absolutely.
Such a great job. Um, Talk to me about this third piece of purpose. And when I say that, purpose, what is one of your favorite stories to tell? Or maybe take us into the book a little bit. What stories did you share in the book? Or what stories do you share when you're speaking about this topic of purpose?
Yeah, do you know? I find when you're asking about purpose, there isn't a story that comes to mind. There is more of I think, a difficulty that a lot of us have when it comes to the question of purpose, and that is that we think we need to find purpose somewhere, and purpose will somehow be given to us. Will at one point it will come, and I spent so many years tied to the notion of what I wanted to become, not who I wanted to become. So the story, maybe there is actually a story here. When I was a teenager, I was very much set on joining the Navy. I wanted to join the Navy, wanted to go there for 2 years. There was this amazing sailing ship that if you joined the Navy for 2 years, you would go around the world once with this amazing 3-mast sailing ship. I was big into sailing and military life seemed intriguing. So it seemed the perfect combination. But as I was saying, I ended up going to Scotland for a voluntary year and then kind of ditched that because I met my wife on the first day of arriving here, and I got into uni, and then, all went away. But I spent a good number of years really questioning myself, of saying, well, you've never pushed yourself. You've never served. Therefore, am I good enough? Right? Did I fulfill my purpose? And I really was tied to that notion. Like, if I didn't join the military, then I didn't test myself enough. Therefore I'm lesser. And it was all tied to this notion of what. And it manifested itself in, I think I went to university, did a bachelor, and then I did a master's, which was very tough, and I persevered through. And then I was offered the opportunity to do a PhD. And I said yes to that. But I didn't have any passion for that, like none whatsoever. It was really purely just about A, can I make it? And B, can I prove to myself that I'm worthy of this title, which seemed so far out of my league. So I did it to prove something to myself that I didn't need to prove. And in the whole process, I was still tying and still wondering about this whole military career that never happened. And I was still looking for that purpose. Like, where's this purpose? I'm still, I've done university once, twice, three times, and this purpose still doesn't come to me. Like, there's nothing there. Why is it not coming? And I think it's so hard in our day and age, because sometimes you have people in school that they know exactly, I want to become this, and this is who I'll be, and they go. And then we have this view now into social media, where you see everybody who is peak at their game, whatever that game is, and they've all seemed to have found their purpose. And you are there scrolling along, and you haven't found it yet. So I struggled with that for a good number of years, to actually then realize at one point. It was really after the birth of our fourth child, our daughter, when I was really wondering, okay, this is still not coming. What am I doing? And it was a good process to go through, to actually say, hang on, the most important people in my life, this is my family. These are the people I want to spend time with. They are my core purpose. And there's another story, if you like, if you want me to go down the rabbit hole now.
Please. Yeah.
All right. So, tied to that idea of military service, I did a camp, a 50-hour camp, which is called SEAL Fit. It was out in California, run by Navy SEALs.
Mark Divine.
Mark Divine, that's it. Very good. So, starting on a Friday morning and going until Sunday lunchtime. And I remember there was two specific moments. One was a few hours in, so you get this welcome party, lots of push-ups, lots of running, you're exhausted. And I had to stand guard with a pole, which was just a rubber pole. And I was standing there pretending to do guard duty, no purpose whatsoever. And I was just standing there in the middle and just thinking, what am I doing here? Like, this is stupid. I should just go home. And then in the middle of the night, we were going to the ocean. We were going in and out of the ocean all the time. And there were these families sitting on the beach, and they were having like a campfire and all of that. And then at the same time, my family was 5 miles down the beach. It was my wife. She was heavily pregnant. She had 3 young kids with her, and I left her alone. And I just thought, what an ass am I that I've just like left them just to like do this stupid thing. But actually, in the process of overcoming that, and the process of going through, I realized this is something I had to do. I had to prove to myself that I can do hard things. But at the same time, the whole thing that pulled me through was I wanted to be the example and set the example for my kids, that I know they're not going to understand it now when they're like 3 years old, 5 years old. But later on, they will see that I said I'm going to do this, and I did it. And maybe they will be a bit proud of me because of that. So that was kind of the revealing of that purpose of like, my family is my purpose, and I've created purpose. I didn't find it.
Wow. I love that. Prove to myself that I can do hard things. I totally get also that experience of, should I be here or should I be home with my kids? I've had so many moments where I've been at an event. It just happened 2 weeks ago. I was at a friend's event, an awesome event. My buddy Qasim Aslam runs a mastermind called Driven with 2 other dudes, and he brought me in. I was being interviewed with the group, and my interview was done, and I was invited to this dinner, and I was sitting there at this dinner thinking, I should be home with my family. Why am I here at this dinner? Right? I did my interview. I should go home. And then I had the most amazing conversation with the guy next to me, Timothy September, who does hypnosis. He's a coach. He asks the best questions. He reflects back. He listens. At dinner, he stopped eating his dinner. He didn't touch his dinner for 30 minutes, asked me the most profound questions, and I had the biggest breakthrough in my marriage that I probably have had in any coaching session in the last 5 years. And it wouldn't have happened if I hadn't have been there in that moment, leaning in. And now I don't want to use that as an excuse to always be away from home, like always in search of another moment that I would find outside of my house.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm so grateful that I had that moment away from my family where I was able to receive some great coaching, some great questions, some great time to reflect. And there's zero question in my mind that I came back 10 times stronger in my marriage with a new perspective, with a new energy because of that experience of being away, because I took time to be in communion with other people, to be receptive to conversations. I didn't bail on the dinner. And had I bailed on the dinner perhaps and gone home, I might be telling you a different story about how going home was the best decision I ever made and how something magical happened at home that didn't happen because I left that event. Beauty of life, right? We just don't know. But
don't know.
gosh, man. Yeah,
Oh,
giving
that's
yourself
awesome.
some time. I love that. Tobi, let's, I'm going to do a hard turn here that's super not graceful out of
Good.
what we were just talking about. But in my research of who you are and what you bring to the world and reading your bio, which is awesome, man. I love learning about guys like you and how you show up in the world. I have so many questions. I'm such a naturally curious person, want to learn all about your life. Something hit me, man, is that you have a PhD in economics, right?
Yeah.
Whenever somebody has a degree like that, especially a PhD, and they spend some time in a classroom or learning in that way, in such a deep way, my question is naturally, how does that serve you? And I've got all sorts of different answers from people, from like, it doesn't really, like, I'm not sure that was the best use of my time, to like, yeah, man, this, I don't use it every day in full, but like the principles changed my life. I'm wondering, as a man, as a family man, as a businessman, how has a PhD in economics truly changed your life? And if you could go back in time, would you do it again? Would you go get that PhD?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. So I'm not using it. I'm definitely not using it. I had a huge passion for economics when I started university. I didn't start with an economics degree as my major. I found it in university and suddenly fell in love with it. Um, I think in terms of everyday use, the bachelor probably was enough, right? It gives you the ability to understand world affairs from an economic perspective as well as business. It's obviously not a business degree as such, but it helps you. What are incentives? How do they work? How do you can use them obviously in a business way. And then it got progressively harder, with the masters being very, very maths heavy, and I wasn't very good at it, and I really, really struggled, but I pushed through. And to the degree that I pushed through, when I was at the end of the year, it was the hardest year I ever had in terms of academic prowess. But I wasn't sure I was going to make it. And I was thinking, well, if I don't make it, you know what? I'm going to do it again. I would do it again, as hard as it was, because I wanted to finish this. So that was like something that shifted, where I wasn't going to run away from stuff just because they got hard. And then the PhD was a very technical, very data driven PhD. Again, no passion whatsoever. So if you were asking me to do it now, there would be no way I would do it. Like, no way. But I was never an endurance athlete. My natural inclination is to be a strength athlete, and the PhD, in a very similar mindset, is this long game of like, you're going into this thing that they might give you a bit of a framework, a bit of an idea that you're exploring, but then you're going into the complete unknown. It's black. You don't know, is it going to be, what data are you going to use? What papers are you going to use to help you write this stuff? Who do you need to talk to? How will you structure the thing? How is the data set going to work? How is the software going to work? All of these things are just completely unknown. And I think being able to do that, go through that, and find your answers is something that will serves you in all areas of life. It serves you definitely in business, to say, do you know what? I've got this problem. I roughly know where I'm going. I don't know the answer, and I don't know how to get there, but I will find a way. And that is the thing. That's the thing I learned. It's like, it's going to be okay. And that served me in so many ways. At the same time, as I said, I had the Mark Divine camp. They were all at the same time. It was this thing of like just pushing myself to a next level. We had our fourth kid, and it was just like, you know what? Whatever the family needs, I know from a physical standpoint and from a mental standpoint, I can push myself and I will be able to provide for them. Therefore, taking a bit away the fear of having a large family. So it has served me in retrospect massively, but I'm not using it day to day, and I wouldn't do it. And I definitely don't think you need to do it from a career standpoint.
Mm.
If you have a passion for something, and for whatever reason a PhD aligns with pursuing that passion, go for it. But yeah, I wouldn't do it again.
It's so funny. I'm sitting here going, what's the thread of this conversation, right? Like, what am I noticing popping up the whole way through, from my research of you, learning about you prior to our chat to this conversation, and like, I just, all the terms started popping up, from long game to adventure to pushing through, just thinking about your words. And then I was thinking, gosh, like endurance, enduring. And then I was thinking about how that was a comment that my coach made to me, that I have an identity of enduring that both serves me, but also hurts me, because I always feel that it's not value if I'm not enduring something difficult, right? So it's
Yep.
almost like I welcome the difficulty into my life so that I can show people that I can endure. And then, dude, I look over your left shoulder and there's endure on the book right behind you.
Yeah.
And it leads me to a question about your brand with your kids. And here's what I'm curious about. If I pulled your kids aside, or if ChatGPT could run an equation or an algorithm of like, how do your kids see you? Okay, so they're all grown up and they're all telling stories of dad. And they're like, what's a phrase that dad repeated often? Right? Like, what did dad teach you about life? Do you know what that would be? Do you know already? They're like, dad always says, you must endure. You must, like, is there something like that for you and your brand? Because I'm seeing it and I'm wondering if your kids are seeing it. I'm sure they are.
I think my kids would, the idea of hard work
Yeah.
and pushing through. I think that would be definitely something that they can see. I always have this. It's funny that you're mentioning about the kids and kind of putting them aside, because I always have this idea in my head. And it's not a driving thing, but it's just something that's always in my mind. It's like, say in 10, 15, 20 years, if one of my kids, for whatever reason, ended up on a podcast and they were asked about their parents, like I would, what would they say? And I always thought, it would be nice, because I think my wife is the absolute star of the show. There's no question about that. Like there's no question. And I don't think anybody would question. They would probably go like, well, okay, we know your mom is an absolute superstar, but what about this dad person of you? That they would actually turn around and said, you know what, like he was a loving, kind, and very present father. Like that to me, that is like total winning. Like it's not about money, it's not about fame, it's nothing, it's all, if they, when they grow up and look back and just said, you know what, my dad worked really hard, but he was also there for us. And he was, my dad came to all my games. He was there. He coached maybe a group, or this year I spent a few weeks supporting some of the summer and school camps that the kids went on, and they can just reflect and said, my dad was actually present and I really liked having him around. Like that is total winning in life. So, but I think they would nevertheless say work hard, because I definitely push them, but not to, I think, their detriment. So one thing, for instance, we do is I grew up and I got pocket money. I didn't have to do anything for that, right? I never had to empty dishwasher or
What about
anything.
money?
Pocket money, like allowance,
Oh,
like the money you give your kids. But we don't do that with our kids. Like our kids need to work for
same.
stuff, And I just think they hated it for a bit, but then they realized, hang on, I was telling them, do you know what? When I went on holiday, I would get like $250 a week, right? So that means for 10 weeks I would have $25 or whatever it is. That's not that much money. But like if you work hard, you can get $25 in a week here. Like if you want to actually go to, where we go, if we go to, went to California not that long ago, if you want to have like a few $100s to just spend and enjoy yourself, I give you that chance. Why don't you go for it? And I think that cycle, is definitely working, and they can see the value of hard work.
Mm, I love that. Well, I gotta say something else about your comment about your wife being the absolute rock star, and just how awesome she is. Dude, whenever I hear that, I first of all, I believe you. And I think it's amazing that you can honor her and see her and acknowledge her in that way. Beautiful. And that's inspiring. And I'm so happy for you. I'm happy for your kids. I'm happy for her to be that type of person. And brother, she married you. So, the more that you give props to her and the more amazing she is, it only indicates how great you must be. Because if somebody that smart, that talented, that awesome, that loving picked you, well, that says a lot about who you are, man.
Yeah, it's just the magic potion was working very well at the time.
Yeah, that's dude. Dude, yeah,
Yeah.
you can, dude. It's there. You know, it's like it's true. It's so funny. I'll loop back on something that Timothy September,
Yeah.
this amazing. I don't know what I would call him. I'll call him my coach for a moment. But he helped me to realize that my wife collects things constantly that used to drive me crazy. She'd pick up every pine cone and rock and shell and bring it home in her pocket and display it on our counter. And I'm like, the organized, disciplined version of John's like this. I need my house more zen. I need it to, right? And I need less clutter. I used to call it clutter. And now
Mhm.
I see it as treasure. Now I see it as like collectibles, and like these are like her these are her artifacts from around the world that she's like, these are all of her memories. These are all of her moments. And then Timothy looks at me in the conversation. He goes, and you know what, John? She collected you. And I was like, oh my God, like just
That's so good.
heartwarming, man. Like
Yeah.
thinking of myself as one of these artifacts, these collectibles that she picked up along the way. And she saw beauty in it. She saw uniqueness in it. And that's what she does. She gathers unique things and people and stories and memories. And that's one of her superpowers. So
Oh, that's beautiful, man.
my the part of me that wants to deflect the love, wants to go, that's not true. And the higher version of me that wants to see the God within me wants to accept that as truth, that she saw that. So anyway, yeah,
That's
well,
so good.
so I'm glad we pivoted, by the way, from the three P's to a PhD in economics, the fourth P. Yeah, let's do this, man. I'm gonna, in no particular order here, I want to get to a couple of questions before we wrap. And
Sure.
maybe one of the biggest is this open-ended, take it where you want question, going back to, I will circle back to where we started, which is your book. And what I would love for you to just comment on, if you can, is, and because I don't want this show to end without me getting to this, is like, who's this for? Right? Like, why is this book so important? Talk to me a little bit about the guy who's listening to this going, all right, sell me again. Why do I want to pick up this book? And what difference do you hope that it makes? Like, take me into the future a little bit. Like we were just talking about, hey, if somebody's commenting on your book on a podcast 5 years from now, what are you hoping that they learn from it? How are you hoping that their life is different?
Yeah. So I'm not charging for it. Really, it's just a collection of my kind of thoughts and experiences. So that hopefully lowers the boundary for people to actually pick it up. Maybe just have a look at it, right? So
Nice.
that should be one. But I think so. The question maybe comes back also to the title, right? Hybrid dad. What does that mean? Because hybrid is for whatever reason, is a bit of a buzzword, I think, within the fitness industry at the moment, where it's all about you do endurance and you do strength, and a lot of people will call something hybrid that might not necessarily be hybrid, but just strength and conditioning. But the idea of hybrid training in the fitness element is that you are progressing two things that normally don't go hand in hand, side by side. So you are learning to go longer, so you're increasing your endurance and your endurance base, whilst at the same time at least maintaining your strength, if not even increasing. And that used to be, for a very long time, it used to be, well, it's either or. Either you get stronger or you can run longer. You can't do both. But there's a way of actually combining the two. And I found that always very, very fascinating. It's the way that I train. But then I was thinking, obviously, also, from this perspective of a dad. So who is this for? So if you're somebody like myself, where you're in this position, and it doesn't matter how many kids you have, but you've got, I would say, probably you are a dad. So you have 1, 2, 3 kids, whatever. So you've got that demand on your time from a family's perspective. So you're a husband and a dad. So that's one. Then the other element is that you are working most of the time. Dads will also be working. Now, whether you're working at home or you're working in a business, doesn't matter, but you're working, you have something to do. So you've got those two elements. And then the third element, which often gets neglected, is the personal element, whether that's a fitness pursuit or whether it's a personal growth pursuit or whether that's hobbies, friends, whatever it is. These three areas are there. And I always felt, you end up a lot of times with people either being very, very successful in business, having a lot of money, but not being present at home. So the kids don't know them, right? Or you have somebody that has a lot of time for their kids, but has a job that they can leave behind, and that's that, and doesn't don't earn much money, or they're very focused on their physique, but therefore neglecting their family. So it's all these things, and of course there is a limit to everything. So I'm not saying you can be Superman and do everything at the same time, but I would hate to kind of marry up to the notion that it has to be either or. But I actually think it can be, you can progress in all three areas, or however many areas you want to identify, but you can progress in all of them and they help each other, right? So if I'm a good business person and I'm good at my job, that helps me be a good provider for my family. That takes away financial stress. Therefore, I can be more present at home because we don't have to worry about stuff. I'm able to provide family with nice holidays and a car and whatever else. So that's all fun and games. That's good for us. And if I focus on myself from a mental and physical perspective, then I'm going to be better at work because I'm more alert. I can give more energy. And equally for my kids, I can throw them in the air. I can chase them in the yard. That serves everybody. So these three areas really complement each other, and we should strive and work on all three. So if as a person you felt I'm very good at one or two, but one of them is lacking, I hope the book helps you and guides you to help the other areas and actually find practices and ways forward to actually elevate all of those areas at the same time.
We were talking earlier about burnout and boundaries. Tell me a little bit about, a time in your life, a recent time, perhaps if it's there, when you felt burnt out or you were burning out on something and realized that boundaries needed to be put into place. And I'm leaning in on this one because burnout and boundaries are something that I've been exploring a lot these last several years.
Yeah. Yeah. Interestingly enough, I had my best friend, who was also the best man, he actually suffered from burnout a while back. And then I had another really good friend who's here in Scotland. He suffered from burnout. And I always struggled with that notion of like, what does that mean? What does burnout mean? And I was really for the last 12 months, I was slacking on my boundaries, and I was saying, all these competing demands, work needs me, family needs me. I want to pursue these fitness goals all at the same time. As I was saying, like trying to elevate all three. It's possible, but I was just saying yes to too many things. And by saying yes to everything, you get overwhelmed, you get stretched, you don't do a good enough job in all these areas because you're saying yes to all those meetings, you're saying yes to all these demands, but actually saying, hang on, I can be good in all three, but I need to say no to certain elements. And it's just something I wasn't good at. I very much have that attitude of a servant leader. At work, I'm working for a nonprofit, which gives me a lot of energy and willingness to work because it's for a good cause. But at the same time, if I don't say no sometimes and protect myself, I can't serve as well as I used to. So I really had to go through, I think, a bit of a phase of burning out, of actually saying, well, this is all a bit much now. I'm not myself anymore. I'm not the person that I used to be because I'm trying to serve everybody at the same time. And actually saying, hang on, I can do this. And if a business problem comes along, I'll deal with it. But at the end of the day, close the laptop and not think about it while I'm reading the kids a story. Like that has to just stop. Because worst case scenario, for instance, if you lost your job, you will lose it anyway. But thinking about it while you're reading your kids a story, or worse, actually acting up and maybe shouting at your kids because you're angry because something happened at work, it's not going to help that situation at all. You're actually making another situation worse that doesn't need to be affected by it. So just being able to say no, boundaries, and saying, I will do a really good job at work and I'm proud of it, but sometimes I can't do it all. And that's okay.
And you've made a commitment to not think about work while you're reading your kids' books, let's say. How often do you succeed at that? Would you say 100% of the time now that you've committed? Or you're like, half the time I'm in present, half the time I'm thinking about work, or some other, a percentage?
So I think I used to be quite good at it, but from an intellectual basis. But actually having gone through a period of really feeling physical, being even opening my laptop and feeling just that sense of dread of like what's going to come next. actually going through that, I realized, hang on, this is taking up way too much of my energy and mental space. It's not serving me. It doesn't help me stay as strong and athletic as I want to be. It doesn't help me stay as calm as I want to be with the kids. So actually having gone through it, I find it much easier now to say, you know what, like I can't do anything about this right now. I've done my best. And if an email comes in and somebody's snippy at me, that's all right. Just, you do that, because at the end of the day, the world will keep turning. And I had a great saying that somebody I spoke to a few months ago actually said, I will butcher it, but it was something about sleep is God's way of telling you that the world will keep spinning, even when you're not there. Like there's like
Right.
something like, it's fine.
Yeah.
Like you might think the world depends on you. It doesn't. Just let go a bit and just enjoy life a bit more.
Do you have a driving mantra or quote or something like that maybe you think to yourself or say to yourself most often?
Um, Again, I will probably come back to a mantra that I've heard from Jocko. His famous discipline equals freedom, and I like it just because of the different where you can apply to so many areas in life. So you can apply it to financial, you can apply it to your sleep, you can apply it to doing the work that you need to do at work. I like that juxtaposition of actually saying, if I focus on this now, I will create space later on. Disciplined enough to say no to something, so I have the freedom to say yes to my kids later. Like it's something that's been since I've heard it. It's just lived with me.
Yeah. And then I'm thinking about where to take this to kind of wrap the conversation. And I'm looking at my questions that I wrote down earlier, and there's so much here, man. It's cool that we could come back and do a second show, and that I know some of these things I was going to ask you about are also in your book. They're in your teachings. People can go to your website. What's the website again?
Forgingbalance.com.
Yeah, I love that, man. Forging balance. You know what I'm going to ask you, man? I want to ask you about this symbol, and I don't. You're going to
Yeah.
have to pronounce it for me, but it's true, quite true, or something like that.
I think it's pronounced triquetra.
Tricatcher. Yeah, there you
Yeah.
go. Thank you. I was, clearly, thank you for guiding me here. But beautiful. It's like a circle with these almost football-esque shapes in a triangle. Somebody might know what I'm talking about. I'm butchering this. Can you tell me about the history of that, where it came from, why it's important, why you chose that? Because it's awesome, man.
Yeah.
It looks great, but I think it'll mean even more when I know the history of it.
So it's an old Celtic symbol. So it's something that you would have found. There's a whole mysticism, and there's different meanings attached to different elements of the Celtic people. Over time. But I was trying to think about that notion of, we've just talked about hybrid and different demands and different areas of life, and they're actually all interlinking. And I like this because it's like, it looks a bit like a pyramid, but each of the corners are interlinking with each other. And I actually got somebody on. I went on Fiverr, and because I'm not good at graphic design, and I paid some money, and I said, look, I like the symbol, but can you make it with different colors actually, so that each color goes into the other, to just symbolize those three elements of business, family, and personal life, and that those three link to each other. And then you've got sometimes the version where just you've got those three interlinking, and then sometimes you have a version where you have a circle around it. And for me, the circle around it is that unity of life, of like all of it is linked, and all of it is your life. And you don't want one side weaker, you don't want one color stronger or one thicker. You want them all balancing at the same time, which then leads into the name of Forging Balance, because it's not something that you find or just happens, but it's you create it, you forge it every day.
So great. Yeah. You ever have those ideas that somebody else came up with, and then when they tell you about it, you're like, damn it, that's such a good idea. Why didn't I think of that? That's one of those, man. That's one of those. It's genius. I love it. It's beautiful. It's meaningful. Well done, man. I could see
Thank you.
myself telling the story that you just shared, and of course, giving you credit because, that's awesome. Thank you so much for that. Brother, is there anything you want to say here to the members of our community, to people who might have found this podcast for the first time, for the guys out there that are, brand new dads, they've got a newborn, they're leaning in, or the guys that have, kids, teenagers heading into adulthood, or even the people who listen to the show, which we have many that have grown kids that still know they're a father and their best work is still in front of them, so do you have thoughts for them if you were to wind this show up, a call to action, a request? What is it? What would you like to say to these guys?
Yeah, I think that the number one thing for me that when you're mentioning all of that, I've spent now, as I said, kind of 3 years writing, 3.5 years sharing my stuff online, connecting with a boatload of dads, mainly from the US, to be honest, is that everybody feels that pressure when kids are of the age of, say, 5 to 11, roughly. It can be a bit less or a bit more depending on the child, really. But those golden years when they're not dependent necessarily only on their mother and they want to spend time with their dad, you're the superhero, and it's before they're teenagers, so they just want to spend time with their friends, is if you have a kid in those years or you're heading into that, like, okay, make sure you're providing for your family, but do not focus on business first. Like, do not, because those years are so precious. Those are 6, 7 years that are just the golden years. And once they're gone, they're gone. And you've got 30 years to make money. Nobody cares about it at that point. But you don't want to be the dad that then suddenly, retires at 50, didn't know your kids, and then want to spend time with them. And they go, well, I don't know who you are, but no, thank you.
It's a great reminder, a great standard, and a great call to action. Thank you, brother, for being here today. Thanks for opening up your heart. Thanks for doing the hard work, man, that's allowed you to be a teacher to so many. You've got quite a following on X. You've got a good community there. By the way, why are they coming to follow you? What do you think they're getting? What are they engaging with? How are they responding to your content in that place?
Yeah.
That's a little plug for your platform there, but also, I guess I didn't have my final question. That is my final question. Yeah, what's going on over there, man? Why are they digging it so much?
It's an interesting question. I mean, sometimes I will share things that I've learned over the years, and they might resonate more with some than other thoughts. But I think that the things most people resonate with is just real stories. The story that I shared with you, which I shared quite early on in my journey there, about my son and myself, which is vulnerable stuff. It's not chat GPT stuff. It's not stuff that, you can just read off the internet, but actually somebody has gone through this and opened up and become vulnerable and shared something with you. That is, I think people will always resonate with that. People will always want to read books that are written by actual human beings rather than an AI making a perfect novel. And I think that's the element that, if you feel open and vulnerable enough that you can take it, people will resonate with it. So do I. I like reading stuff from people that have actually gone through things and sharing their lessons and sharing their advice, and you can take it or leave it. So yeah, I think just a real human being going through real life.
Great conversation today, Tobi. Look forward to
Thanks, John.
possibly continuing to build our friendship, man, if the stars align and allow us to keep connecting or doing work together. But I love that you're serving men, fathers, entrepreneurs, business owners, and those who just want to do good in the world. I admire your endurance, your perseverance, your willingness to do hard work. I've enjoyed learning about your life and your story, and blessings to you, brother. Thanks for being here.
Thank you, man. Really enjoyed it.